Every empire swears its money is safe. Every government insists its promises will last forever. And every time, history proves them wrong. From Rome to France, from the Confederacy to modern Lebanon, ordinary people have woken up to find their savings worthless, their salaries meaningless. Their futures stolen by systems they believed were solid. Collapse is not rare. Collapse is the rule. The real question is never whether financial systems fail. It is how you protect yourself when they do. The most dangerous financial mistake you can make is believing in permanence. We look at our bank balances and national currencies, assuming they are bedrock. But money is not bedrock. Money is trust, and trust can vanish overnight. That is why history is both brutal and useful, because every collapse leaves behind a trail of lessons about what actually protects wealth and what evaporates into dust. The survivors were never the ones who trusted most. They were the ones who doubted first. Take the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of Rome that survived 1,000 years after the Western Empire fell. At the heart of its economy was the gold solidus, coin so reliable that merchants across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia accepted it for centuries. But the Byzantines eventually made the same mistake Rome had made before them. They began shaving the coin's purity, mixing in cheaper alloys. At first no one noticed. Then trust cracked. The coin that had anchored Mediterranean trade became just another piece of political fiction, and the Byzantine economy lost the stability it had enjoyed for generations. What survived? Not paper promises. Not government decrees. Merchants who had quietly held real gold or land outside imperial reach preserved their wealth while everyone else watched their money evaporate. The first timeless lesson is this: governments cannot resist the temptation to dilute their money. When they do, real value flees to assets they cannot counterfeit. But not every collapse comes from rulers tinkering with coins. Sometimes it comes from shocks that strike out of nowhere. In the mid-14th century, the Black Death killed as many as half of all Europeans in just 4 years. Cities emptied, trade routes broke down, and entire villages disappeared. And yet the economic story of the plague is more complex than simple catastrophe. Because when half the labor force disappears, the survivors gain leverage they never dreamed of. Labor became precious, land became cheap. Families with liquidity could buy property at a fraction of its former cost. The crisis did not destroy wealth, it transferred it. From the unprepared to the prepared. From the passive to the positioned. During COVID, we saw a modern version of the same pattern. Supply chains broke, governments printed trillions, and those with liquidity bought assets, while those living paycheck to paycheck slipped further behind. The rhyme is clear across 600 years. Crises reward those with reserves and punish those without them. Renaissance Florence shows us yet another face of collapse, the failure of institutions that appear too powerful to fall. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial capital, home to powerful banking dynasties that had lent heavily to kings. When Edward III of England defaulted on enormous loans, the banks collapsed like dominoes. Depositors were ruined. Trade froze. The ordinary citizen who had trusted the city's mighty banking houses discovered that size was not safety and reputation was not protection. Too big to fail is a lie as old as finance itself. The lesson repeated in 2008 with Lehman Brothers and in 2019 when Lebanon's banks simply froze their customers' accounts. Institutions exist to profit, not to guarantee your survival. When they fall, they take your savings with them. The American Civil War is remembered for its battles and its politics, but behind the gunpowder was a brutal financial war. Both the Union and the Confederacy discovered that modern war requires printing money. The Union issued greenbacks paper, not backed by gold. Inflation followed. In the South, it was far worse. The Confederacy printed its currency in staggering quantities. By the end of the war, Confederate inflation had reached unimaginable levels, with prices rising thousands of %. Soldiers' paychecks becoming worthless before they could spend them. By 1865, Confederate currency was not just weak, it was dead. What mattered in that collapse was not paper but hard assets. Land, food, gold, anything real. Your own country has already lived through a currency collapse. When it happened, protection came not from trusting the paper in your wallet, but from holding value the system could not inflate away. France in the 1790s delivers the same lesson with revolutionary intensity. As the new government seized church lands, it issued a paper currency called the assignat, supposedly backed by the value of confiscated property. Instead, the government printed them endlessly. Each new issue diluted the last. Prices spiraled. Wages failed to keep pace. Farmers refused to sell food for paper, demanding silver or goods instead. Bread riots returned to Paris, and the revolution devoured itself. The winners were not the ones holding patriotic paper. They were the ones holding food, gold, or property, things the government could not print. Promises, no matter how noble, are only worth what others will accept. When trust breaks, savings do not just shrink, they vanish. Fast forward to 1997, and the same story plays out across Asia. What began as a speculative attack on the Thai baht spiraled into a regional catastrophe. Thailand had borrowed heavily in dollars, confident its currency peg would hold. When it collapsed, foreign debts became unpayable overnight. Currencies across Southeast Asia collapsed in a chain reaction. The people who suffered most were not the global hedge funds that sparked the panic. It was ordinary citizens whose savings lost value, whose mortgages doubled in cost, and whose jobs evaporated. Those who held dollars or assets abroad survived better than those who trusted local currency. What looked like a local crisis was a global transfer of wealth. Debt in someone else's money is a death trap. When the storm hits, it is never the creditor who drowns. It is the debtor. And if all of this feels like ancient or distant history, consider Lebanon between 2019 and 2021. The banks simply locked the doors. Citizens woke up to find their deposits frozen, withdrawals limited, and their currency losing over 90% of its value. A lifetime of savings became pocket change. Middle-class families, retirees, doctors, and engineers, anyone who had trusted the system, were wiped out. Your money in a bank is not a treasure chest. It is a loan you have made to an institution that can decide in a crisis not to pay you back. The people who survived best were those who had diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or kept cash outside the banking system entirely. How do you protect yourself when everything falls apart? History shows there is no single answer, but there is a constant theme. In Byzantium, it was gold. After the Black Death, it was liquidity to buy abandoned land. Florence, it was refusing to trust institutions that were too big to fail. In the Confederacy, it was hard goods. France, it was food and property. In Asia, it was avoiding debt in someone else's currency. In Lebanon, it was getting out of the banks before the doors closed. The details change, but the truth does not. Survival comes not from blind trust in paper or institutions, but from recognizing what holds real value when illusions collapse. And here is the paradox that should keep you awake. Collapse is both tragedy and opportunity. For the unprepared, it is ruin. For those with resilience, liquidity, and real assets, it is the moment to build wealth at a fraction of its former cost. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners. After 2008, those with cash bought homes while millions were foreclosed. But wealth is not only about what you own, it is also about what you can do. The baker who could still provide bread, the farmer who could feed a community, the craftsman who could repair what others could not. These were the people who did not just survive collapses, they rose in them. In every crisis, money loses meaning, but production never does. People still need to eat, to build, to trade, to live. And those who can meet those needs are never poor for long. Every collapse in history is ultimately a transfer. From the many who trusted to the few who prepared. From paper promises to tangible value. From passive savers to active builders. History has shown this pattern again and again without a single exception. So the question is not whether the system will fail. It always does eventually. The question is whether you will be standing in line holding worthless promises or standing apart holding something real. History does not repeat exactly, but if you ignore it, it will crush you all the same.